Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I just want to see if I can get a thumbs up if I'm audible. Great, thank you. We're just going to give our colleagues 2 minutes. Thank you for joining on time. Apologies for keeping you waiting. We'll get started shortly. Good morning, everybody, and thank you once again for joining this webinar on the National Pathway Management Network's Innovation Fund. We have launched our third call for proposals, and this webinar is going to try and assist you to put in an application with the right documents, packaged well and on time. My name is Evelyn George, and I am in the Partnerships Program Department at IDC. I am in a room with many supporters and assistants. I am going to be joined by Tseho Walker, who's a director in the presidency, who is going to give us some background information on the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. Just maybe to start off with some, can go to the next slide. To start off with some introductions, like I said, I'm Evelyn George, and many of you are on this call because you registered your interest to join this webinar. And on those forms, you were asked to document or to put together some questions that you have about the call. So thank you so much. It's informed how we've put the call together, how we put the slides together. However, just to manage expectations, some of those questions were around, kind of consultation type questions around projects, specifics around projects. We're likely not going to be able to do that here. There was also a number of questions about general IDC funding. We are not going to be able to tackle that here at all. However, we've put in the relevant websites where you can contact IDC at the call center, or you can go into IDC's funding to be able to source for further information. So with that, I'll call on Tseho to do our background on the National Pathway Management Network.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing well. Confirming that you can hear me. If you can, please, can you thumbs up? I see a thumbs up. Great. Also confirming that you can see my screen and that it's in presenter mode. Great. Thank you again for joining us, colleagues. My name is Tshego Walker, and I am the director in the presidency responsible for the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. Today, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, the National Pathway Management Network, which is a core component of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, and a little bit about the Innovation Fund before handing back over to Evelyn. The PYEI, as we call it, was launched in 2020 by the President to address the youth unemployment crisis in the country. In the sixth administration, we implemented 4 components across 5 priority growth sectors that really aim to accelerate the pace at which young people can pathway into the economy. At the beginning of the 7th administration, we really started to grapple with what it would take to significantly shift the dial in youth unemployment. And after conducting a modeling exercise, as well as a number of additional studies, we launched our strategy for the 7th administration that is targeting a reduction in the youth unemployment rate of between 10 to 20 percentage points through the implementation of 5 levers: inclusive hiring, which is around the deliberate hiring of young people, really targeted to the formal economy; unlocking the job creation potential of priority growth sectors, and we have selected 6 sectors as priority sectors due to their potential to employ young people at scale. Sustainable youth self-employment, recognizing that as a country we have lower self-employment rates than other countries at the same stage of development as ours, as well as public employment programs. But central to our efforts as the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, and really a cross-cutting lever, is the establishment of the National Pathway Management Network that guides young people towards opportunities for training, work experience, income, as well as information about events and resources available in the communities in which young people live. So what is the National Pathway Management Network? So essentially, it is what we call a network of networks that brings together all the partners, the platforms, and the networks in the country that serve unemployed young people. The rationale of the National Pathway Management Network is that young people often do not know where to go to access information, to access resources and support. They also do not. They also face the barriers of the high cost of looking for jobs. So they have to go to an internet cafe. They have to get on a taxi, etc. And so the other thing is that there are many platforms, many programs that serve unemployed young people. And so if a young person does not know about all of them or have the networks that can link them to these platforms, then they are disadvantaged. And so the National Pathway Management Network brings together all of these partners, these programs, and these platforms. We have brought together over 40 public and private sector partners that are all addressing the barriers that young people face to accessing the labor market. And on the slide here are just a number of those partners. We have the sayouth.mobi platform, which is the anchor platform of the National Pathway Management Network, the NYDA's ERP platform, the Department of Employment and Labor's ESSA platform, as well as the labor centers of the department, the centers of Harambee, YES, SALDRU, ANDI, NBI, and a number of other partners. There are 3 core objectives of the National Pathway Management Network. The first is stimulating and aggregating demand. So stimulation of demand refers to the creation of new earning opportunities for young people, either by changing policy or regulations, by the introduction or the realignment of incentives to strengthen the absorption of young people into the private sector, or through leveraging public-private partnerships. So that's around creating new opportunities. And then aggregating demand refers to the aggregation of existing learning and earning opportunities for young people in both the public and private sectors into the network. And essentially what this does is make the National Pathway Management Network the go-to place for a young person that is looking for opportunities, for resources, and for support. The second objective is to drive systems change to address the barriers that young people face. I mentioned earlier that some of these barriers include the high cost of looking for opportunities, limited skills required to look for opportunities, limited access, and limited information about the resources and available support structures that are available to young people. And then finally, linking young people to opportunities, which aims to facilitate the way in which young people access opportunities through the network. Excuse me. One of the core objectives, as I mentioned, of the National Pathway Management Network is around this addressing the barriers that young people face in accessing opportunities. And so before the National Pathway Management Network, a young person would need to go to sayouth.mobi and look for opportunities there. They then need to catch a taxi to their nearest labor center or walk to their nearest labor center to get information about opportunities there. They need to go to the NYDA ERP, and then they need to go to YES. All of which is costly for young people, and all of which is time consuming for young people. But with the National Pathway Management Network, we are linking the different platforms and opportunities are being shared across the different platforms between the networks, increasing the visibility of these opportunities, so that if a young person goes on sayouth.mobi, which, by the way, is 0 rated and free for young people to access, then they can see the opportunities from the NYDA ERP, they can see the opportunities from YES, they can see the opportunities from JobJack, and in fact, there are also APIs with the Indeeds of the world. So we really are wanting to make this a one-stop shop for young people. The other thing that we are doing with the National Pathway Management Network, when we say we want this to be a one-stop shop, is that we've brought in partners that are doing different things. So, for example, we have those partners who are mapping the resources and support structures that are available to young people in their communities. So Youth Explorer maps the government services that are available to young people in their local communities. ANDI is mapping the entrepreneurship support organizations that are available to young people in their communities. YD CoLab is mapping the youth development organizations that are available to young people in their communities. So we have those partners. We have partners with e-learning platforms, and in fact have created an e-learning repository, really trying to make this the place where young people go, or the network that where young people go when they're looking for support. This slide just outlines that the network has been successful in reaching the most excluded young people. So 70% of the opportunities on SA Youth, which I said is the anchor platform of the network, were accessed by young women, 88% Black African, 82% have obtained a matric. Of course, we are, maybe not of course, but we are underrepresented as it relates to the proportion of those young people who have disclosed a disability, and that is something that we're working on. But we also have those young people in the network who access social assistance or who go to quintile 1 to 3, the poorer resource schools in the country. And so we are succeeding in reaching the most disadvantaged, but of course there's still more work to do. The final thing I want to say before handing back over to Eve is that those partners or the organizations that will be successful in the Innovation Fund will be required to join the National Pathway Management Network. We have 4 subcommittees. The 5th subcommittee is called Pilots, and that's really where the programs that we're piloting or the programs that are being funded by the Innovation Fund meet on a quarterly basis, share their learnings, with the intention actually to see how and if these pilots can be institutionalized within the broader government system. So I will stop there and hand back over to Eve. Thank you, colleagues. Looking forward to the engagement after the presentations.
Thank you, Teko. It's a great segue into the next section of the presentation. I didn't cover housekeeping, colleagues, at the beginning of the conversation. My apologies for that. So you will see that you're not able to perhaps unmute yourself or switch on your video. That's just to allow us to be able to better manage the webinar. So please post your questions in the chat. My colleagues will try and address your questions directly. If they're not able to, they will also nudge me to address the questions. And if that fails, we will try and address it in an extended FAQ publication. Yes, the slides will be shared after the webinar. They'll be shared soon after the webinar. Nonjabula, thank you. And then there's a question on the list of current partners that should be available on the presidency, on the SONA website or the presidency website. Yes, and then we can also share an updated version when we do our post-webinar communication. Right, so Teko has given us the broader context of the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. In the Innovation Fund, in the iteration that is at IDC, we were able to approve 8 projects in the past. I'm not going to go into detail, but this is just to give an idea that shows that we are sector agnostic. We have approved projects in animal health, social and community, in the property sector, ICT, healthcare, financial services, global business services, and the creative sector. So in the build up to the webinar, there were lots of questions about sectors, provinces. We are not particular about sectors. However, the focus of this round is in marginalized areas, rural areas, where the youth with high levels of youth and employment. So where you are able to implement projects that target these youth without necessarily having them move, that will give you a competitive edge. Right, so we'll move on to the next slide. Great. So the scope of the EOI, as I said, is focusing on marginalized areas, peri-urban townships, poverty nodes, and rural areas. And our desired outcome or output is the facilitation of sustainable jobs for young people and the micro entrepreneurship and income earning opportunities. So when we say that, and if some of you might be aware, there are many public employment programs. There's the PES, there's the BAY. It's not the type of, we are not looking at those kinds of jobs. We are looking at jobs on a sustained period, even if it is in a gig type environment where they are able to secure a number of gigs over a period of time. And what we would look at is, say, over a period of 12 months, the earning of that young person. So we don't want, or we are not looking for in this round, opportunities that look like perhaps they should better fit in the EPWP or the public employment programs. So we are therefore looking for intermediaries that have strong market linkages. So for example, if we're looking at entrepreneurship options to the input markets, but also to the logistics, and that will facilitate access to markets. So we are not necessarily interested in an intermediary that's going to do fantastic training and skills development work alone, and then leave it to the young people to fend for themselves. Of course, independence is critical, but the idea is there's active facilitation by the intermediary. So I've touched on the areas on marginalized areas and youth. We are also looking for intermediaries that can leverage local systems. As Tseho presented, the National Pathway Management Network is a network of networks. We're looking to broaden and deepen that network, and to the extent that we can incorporate local players, community-based organizations, local municipalities, that will be a competitive edge. So everything I'm talking about here, that is not saying that you must do it. But if you don't do it, it will definitely place your application at the lower end of the competition. And the reason I'm saying this is we don't want partnerships that are necessarily, just forced because they want to win an allocation in this bid. They have to be genuine, entrenched, and functional. Okay, so I've discussed and also those partnerships also should focus on the training environment, so the training artisans, the TVET environment, and how we get those young people into income earning, if not employment or decent employment opportunities. The allocation that we will be made is a grant. I did have some questions asked about whether what kind of funding it is. It is a grant, and we're looking at between 3.5 million and 10 million allocation per partner. And this will be dispersed in tranches after contracting and to the successful applicant. I just want to touch on something that came up in the questions around, and I hope that in Tseho's presentation and what we've done so far, we're able to give an idea. So the National Pathway Management Network, or the Innovation Fund, is not going to be doing the implementation. We are looking to intermediaries that will design the solution and implement the solution. So for our part, we will do the adjudication, the contracting, and we'll do the monitoring and evaluation activities, and obviously the facilitation around the network itself. But we look to intermediaries as the experts, as the people that are going to implement the solution, supported by the network and the funding. So we don't necessarily deal with patents and IP. that would be within the intermediary's purview. At this stage, I just want to ask if there are any questions I should be picking up from the chat. Okay, no, so I hear that our chat is sorted. So I'll just move on then to eligibility. So this is what gets you into the room, right? We have published the EOI, and I am going to share the links later on in the presentation. It's critical that the requirements per the eligibility section are met in full. Otherwise, that application will be deemed eligible and we will not consider it at all. So the first things first is that we need to submit. The closing date is on the 23rd of September at 5 o'clock. We will share the email address shortly about on where those applications will be sent or should be sent to in order to be considered applied for. So the documents required in that section, we have put together a checklist, an application form, which includes a checklist and an impact statement. So what we try to do with this round is to make it as light as possible for the applicants. However, having you share information about your initiatives so that it gives us enough information to be able to make a call to then request shortlisted applicants to submit a more detailed proposal. So at this stage, we do want to know the basics, but we try not to overburden applicants because we know some of these processes can be quite intense. So we're trying to know the basics that will give us a good enough indication of whether it's a good fit and it's a competitive application for the Innovation Fund. So we do need the application form, your registration documents with the necessary body, CIPC if it's a company or NPC, and social development if it's an NPO. And then we've asked for a theory of change. I'm going to share a diagram of a theory of change. Please try and make it succinct in diagrammatic fashion if possible, and one page, please, whether it's a Word document or PowerPoint document. So for private this EOI is open to all organizations, provided that they are registered with their relevant body. If it's a private organization, we've asked for match funding. If it's an NGO, NPC, there's no requirement for match funding, and that's something that has come about after a few iterations of this Innovation Fund, where NGOs have said it's sometimes a challenge to raise funding. We know that we are in a constrained environment. However, we have made it a competitive element for NGOs, but it's a requirement for private organizations. We've asked for a track record. For a 3-year track record for the organization, not the manager or the CEO or the board members, but the organization. We need to know that there's capacity to implement this project. And we do that by looking at your track record. So how are we going to verify that? We've asked for 3 references and 3 project summaries, references from your funders or your partners, and project summaries where we've detailed just basic information we'd like to see, because we'd like to see that it's similar to what you're proposing to do. So in the questions, there's been a lot of around startups. Startups, I suppose, depending on what definition you're using, if the 3-year track record is met around the project that they're proposing to implement, they will be considered. However, if they're not able to meet that 3-year track record requirement or the 3-year itself, they won't be considered. So it's not that a particular organization is excluded, they just need to meet the eligibility requirements. There's also been questions about BE level. In the application form, we do ask for it. However, there's not a specific BE target or ownership that we require. The most important thing, or one of the most important things, is that the young people that benefit, that the young people do benefit, and it's young people from marginalized areas. So whether they're the owners of the project or they're the suppliers, etc., we haven't really been prescriptive in that regard. So, as I mentioned, this is the email address at the bottom depicts, or is the email address that you'll send all your documentation to. You can send as many emails as you want, depending on the size of your document. We've asked for we don't want, voluminous submissions. So try and respond to the question link the various emails together. We've also asked for audited or reviewed financial statements for the last 3 years. That's also in support of your track record. Again, there was a request from a last call that perhaps audited statements are a high ask, especially at this stage. So we said we will accept reviewed, but please make sure they are either or. If they are neither of these two, they will not be considered eligible. A high-level budget, just so we see that you are asking for the requirement, and output. Are you creating jobs? Are you creating employment opportunities, and over what period of time? Okay, so I hope this is visible, but we will share the slides. It's an example of a theory of change, and it's a great one because it starts with the challenges, which is the problem statement that the project is trying to address. What is the issue in the community or in the locality? Why are there barriers to these, or why are these challenges compounded by whatever barriers are presented in the community or in the sector? What the inputs will be from this project, or what inputs will be required from this project to be able to address the challenges or remove the barriers, what the outputs will be, and the outputs will be the short-term and measurable deliverables. So we are training 5 people so that they can operate a specialized machine so that they can start their businesses in that area. Those are the kinds of outputs we want to see. How many entrepreneurs are going to be plugged into a certain value chain? What are the volumes of product that they are going to be selling, etc., etc. The outcome is the medium to longer term deliverables of the project. We won't necessarily we will be there perhaps to for the outer side of the outer periphery, sorry, of the project duration. But what we will do is we will engage evaluation experts to help us to document and codify those outcomes, which then speaks to the impact about the general systemic change that has happened. So whilst in our short time together, we will mostly be able to extract outputs, we'll also start to see that the outputs are leading to the outcomes, and we'll also engage evaluation experts to validate the outcomes that the project has delivered. Okay, then on the web page, I hope many of you have been on the web page, have interacted with the various documents. The one page goes to the Innovation Fund website itself. If you search on the IDC's website for Innovation Fund, unfortunately, you won't find it. So you have to follow this link. The link is also in our advert. We will share the slides so you can also click. The EOI, the specifics of the EOI are also on the website if you scroll down, and the application form is there, and we'll go through the application form just now. To talk to the various things that we've asked for, and then we've also published an FAQ. If we see that in this round of engagement that there are other critical questions we need to address that we haven't addressed, we'll also bring them up in the extended FAQ. At this stage, I want us to go into the actual application form. So we're just going to yeah. Okay, so the first section is just the basics, and again, we do invite consortia to apply if that's how you think it's if that's the best way you think to deliver the project. However, it can be one applicant. It can be just one lead applicant. So in terms of basics, we've asked for the basic information, tax clearance, VAT reference, if it's applicable. Like I mentioned, we've asked for the BE certificate. At this stage, we're not prescriptive about the BE level. We just want to know what your BE credentials are, the value of funding your sector. And then we've asked for for an indication of whether you're politically or directors are politically exposed. As IDC is a financial services institution, we do have to manage that, and we've given a link to give on what the definition of PEPs, as they're called. Later on in the process, if we do progress to stage 2, we'll do then a full FICA of directors. At this stage, we haven't asked for that. So this is all basic information about the organization. And then we get into the impact criteria. So what we've said, we have, I think there are 8 impact criteria. And you'll see that there's a weighting against each impact criteria. They add up to 100. Like I said, it's imperative that your project hits high scores on all the elements, because your project is going to be looked at against all the other projects. There are about 93 people on this call. If we're looking for about 10 to 15 projects, we do have to have a way to select what we think are the most responsive to the call. So like I mentioned, funding, we've made an impact score. It's a match funding requirement for the private sector. So if all of them come and they have 1:1, they will all have basically the same score. The higher they go beyond that 1:1, the higher their score will be. We also, and some of how we look at the funding aspect is leveraging funds from a variety of funders. So that is government, public funding, philanthropic funders, even some element of social enterprise. We look at the diversity of the funding also. All funding is acceptable as long as it's governed by an agreement. We are not anti-loans or anti-grants, but what we have said is that we don't want organizations that are overly reliant on public funding. And in the EOI, we did specify that more than 50% we won't consider, and we know that it's a very constrained environment, but we want to see organizations that are that are quite dynamic in that fundraising space. Partnerships, we talked about the core of what the NPMN is a network, is a partnership model. So we want to see projects where we're able to bring in new partners, different kinds of partners, opportunity holders, procurement holders, and so on, to be able to strengthen the partnership. So we're looking for those that can absorb young people, that are able open to giving young people decent gig work and the likes. So it's about the diversity of the partners and the different aspects that they bring into the network. Scale. Fund. It is an innovation fund, and we are looking at innovative models. And this can be in the area that we're working. It can be, oh, am I not audible? It seems like some people are losing me. Am I audible now? Can I just get a thumbs up? Okay, thanks, Zianda. Okay, great. Apologies for that. I'll just backtrack a little bit. So scale. Let me just double up on my connection. Wi-Fi and MTN. Okay, so scale, here we're referring to how you will expand the geographic footprint in working with young people or working with in new areas. Apologies for that. And like we said, we are looking at pilots that are ready to scale. We're not necessarily looking for pilots that are going to start piloting. So there were questions around feasibility studies and so on. We won't necessarily do that because our target is for the jobs to be created in the time that we are engaged and or the income earning to have progressed significantly in the time that we are engaged. So innovation, yes, it's innovation around a model, around a particular product or in an area. It's not necessarily IP, well, it could be IP related, but we're not looking at prototyping technologies and so on. We will look favorably on projects where there's innovation that can scale the solution, that can scale it faster. So we do encourage technology-enabled solutions. However, we are not necessarily looking at prototyping and so on. Capacity and readiness to implement, we are looking at so we've spoken about the track record of the organization, and then we're also going to we just perhaps want to look at your directors and your top management at this stage. Just an organogram will do for that submission, and maybe a brief profile on the CEO and the chair. On sustainability, we're looking at it from different angles. So on the one hand, and we've spoken about fundraising, we want organizations that are able to raise funds from a number of types of organizations, and grant funding, repayable grants, etc., because we want to know that whatever we have seeded or whatever we have started can continue by the organization continue to raise funding. If we select it for scale, we want it to be replicated by other types of funders. So that we want to see. Secondly, if it's about jobs, we want it to be jobs where the young person in this in the time they're with the organization, in the time they're in the project, they've received the necessary training, they've received the necessary tools and the skilling to be able to market themselves to other parts, other players in the sector that can absorb them. So if it's for example, a 12-month project, and the young person is exposed to the workplace in that time, we want to be relatively certain that after that the young person their chances of securing similar work are just as high. So we look at sustainability in terms of the organization applying, the sustainability of the jobs to be created, and then lastly, sustainability of the entrepreneurs. So if we are looking at value chain integration for entrepreneurs, say in an agriculture project, please can it be a product that is, has been tested, there's a market established for it, we've established the market linkages, at least for the initial phase, etc., etc. We don't want projects where when the funding ends, the impact stops, right? Because that will mean that the right side of a theory of change is completely invalidated. Okay, then additionality. So additionality, I know this is a tricky one. Often we see project sponsors wanting to say, okay, we are scaling and that's additionality. We are not looking at it in that sense. We want to see how different would the outcomes be, how different would the outputs be by the injection of this grant, by the implementation of this project. So yes, it would have to be building on what your baseline is currently or what's currently on the ground in the area. And the big one that we spoke about, and we can see here, I think it's one of the two that are weighted 20%, is spatial equity. We are really, really keen on expanding the pie, on diversifying the pie, and looking at solutions that can include young people in the outskirts, in the peripheries, so that they can participate. And yes, sometimes there are some projects that require young people to move and so on. But as much as possible, we really would like to see the solution implemented at the location or close to where the young people are. I just want to check if there are any questions I need to be addressing at this stage. Okay. So the next part is the submission requirements, and we've also put in a tick box there, a checklist for yourselves. Please note that yes, there's a no that asks for reasons, but we expect all the ticks to be yes, and that is what will render them eligible. If there's something missing, then it's likely going to be ineligible. So please endeavor to submit all the required documents. In substance. We've talked about the theory of change. You can develop yours. There is a lot of resources on the internet to develop one, and probably even AI can assist in terms of structure, not in terms of the content. But please, I mean, that's actually the only way we'll know what your project is about. You can see on the application form, there's nowhere really where we've asked you to describe the project. And that's how we also know if there's been some really clear design thinking in what the project is going to do. So that's our blueprint around what your project is delivering. So please include that. As I've discussed, match funding on a 1:1 basis for the private organization. So what is the match funding going to take form of? It's a question we're asked frequently. If it's so it could be one of many things. If you have cash reserves, if you have some cash on your balance sheet, please supply your latest financials. If you are having conversations with a partner and they haven't matured yet, we can do letters of intent. If you are really advanced and you already have maybe a multi-year funding agreement, you can submit this. At this stage, any will do. If you go into the next stage, then we'll ask for more solid match funding commitments. If, for example, we got a letter of intent. But at this stage, any of that will do. We've had even bank statements submitted. We'll accept that for now. I'm seeing some questions about in-kind. Should I? Okay, so in-kind match funding for private organizations won't do. We want cash match funding for private organizations. For NGOs and so on, yes, it will be welcome. But for the private organizations, an absolute requirement for cash match funding. We've spoken about the 3 years, so we do need references, and please, can they be recent references? Yeah, relatively recent, let's say not older than a year, 6 months. We don't want references that are 5 years old. And then ideally, your references should speak to your project summaries, right? Because that's the only way we can really verify it. And then we've spoken about audited or reviewed financials. Please make sure that they are signed by the auditor and director. Again, without those, we don't know whether they were completed. So ensure that they're signed by the directors and the auditor or the reviewer of the document. And then like I said, we've asked for a budget. You can present it in Excel format, ideally, and please limit it for now to a page, so that we can quickly assess what is in it. And then we go back. So the last one, 0.8, is talking to how you respond to the impact criteria. So it's a response around the project to the impact criteria. And again, please ensure that it is the application form is signed by the duly authorized person. Otherwise, it will be considered incomplete and invalid for that reason. So yeah, this is the extent of the application form. Perhaps let me just take a pause here to check if there are any questions that I should be addressing. Okay, all right, thank you. We'll just go back to the presentation. Okay, maybe let's look through the website. So if you go on the website and scroll down, the first document is the application form that we've just gone through. And then if you must look at the document titled EOI, which is what will take you through the specifics of the round, what we are looking for. It gives some background, overview about IDC, and then we even give some examples about what kinds of, not necessarily what kinds of project, but the elements that a successful project will have, in terms of removing barriers, in terms of linking young people with opportunities. As I mentioned, we are going to employ a two-stage process. So after this, we will check for eligibility. So, and that's a yes, no. We have our 7 questions or 7 requirements. If any of them is a no, that project falls off the list. We do have a second webinar on the 16th of September. So if your colleagues were not able to make this one, please encourage them to pop in for that webinar. So after the eligibility process, we will then go through the competitive assessment where each application will be ranked against all those criteria, and then the top 10 to 15 will be selected. It's not the final list, and then there may be a further selection process based on what we find. At that stage, we'll ask those partners to submit a detailed project plan audited project scope, and then we'll do the final selection of those 15. So again, the project scope is just talking about what we're looking at. We've given some characteristics, some more characteristics of what a competitive application will look like. We have said that training is important, but it has to be training in a real world environment that allows young people to gain skills quickly and to start to utilize those skills to earn income or to be placed in a job. We don't necessarily, whilst there's a place for them, but we would favor those where the training is experiential and there's a quick turnaround, obviously with quality, into a working or an income earning environment. We are looking for strong pathways out of government programs. Government is the biggest employment, runs the biggest employment programs, but we also looking for other for the young people to be able to use this as a platform to be able to access other types of programs, other types of income earning opportunities. So not this thing where they're going from internship to internship, but they can actually genuinely start to build their career and wealth, so to speak. We've spoken about fundraising, innovation, and the types of partnerships we're looking for, and the emphasis on local resources. We know that the world of entrepreneurship is tough. It's tough for micro entrepreneurs, even for informal enterprises that some of you may be engaging with. So we encourage that there is post-program support. You know, it's one thing to be selling to your 10 clients. However, if you start to be exposed to a bigger retail environment, or it's tough. So both in terms of the logistics, the financial, but also the psychological. So we want that support to be there for the young people, payments, and so on, and enabled by tech, right? Because if you tell us that you've connected 16 people, for example, to a value chain, we need a way to be able to verify that. So as much as possible, please, can you, we also look for systems, your systems or systems that you're going to procure that will assist us to verify the claim that you're making. If it's a young person in a job, that's a little bit more straightforward, depending on the relationships fostered, in that we can see a contract, etc. When it's an entrepreneur and you're assisting them to plug into a network or a value chain, we do need a good system to be able to play back that output to us, that we, in a way that we can verify it. Yeah, so I've spoken about knowledge management and knowledge management systems, and the use of technology tools and solutions to be able to source data, feedback data reports. There may be audits further along the line, and it's important that the integrity of data is solid for us to be able to access it. And like we said, psychosocial support for the young people. A lot of what we know is that being unemployed for long periods of time has an impact on young people in the workplace. When they come into the workplace, preparing them, helping them to stay employed, helping them to stay in that environment and still manage the demands that they have at home. I'm just going to pause here. I also need to drink something. Are there any questions? Okay. All right. Okay. Back to presentation. All right, so I'm just looking through my slides to see if there's anything else that I need to be mentioning, and based on the questions that we received. Okay, so there were questions around it was spoken about partnerships and scale and so on. So there were questions around, whether we'll do prototyping and the likes, and I said likely not, because the immediate outcome is not likely to be jobs. However, if it is a new technology, we do require that at least there's a minimum viable product, a product that has gone through some level of testing and it's ready for the market. So we are not anti new technology, but please, can it be ready for use to benefit the young people? Okay. And then maybe just to speak a little bit about timelines. So like I mentioned in week 1, so we close on the 23rd. In the first week, we are going to be testing applications against eligibility criteria. Is the document there or not? Have you responded to the question or not? And that's a simple yes, no. And after that, we will then come to our first list of our first short list. Then we will judge or assess rather the applications against the impact criteria, each of those 8. And like I said, we are looking for 10 to 15. So what is bound to happen is that some projects, as fantastic as they are, may fall off. It's not that they weren't, and it won't necessarily be that they're not eligible, but we are ranking against each other using the challenge fund principle. And that should then take us the next 2 weeks, and then we expect to communicate to all applicants by the 3rd week. So in the week of the 20th of October, to communicate to all applicants, successful and unsuccessful. At that stage, then, we will embark on stage 2 of the application process, where applicants will then be requested to submit detailed proposal. We'll ask them to submit within a very short space of time, which is 2 weeks, I beg your pardon, and then we may further shortlist. After that, we'll do some due diligence, and then we'll start to present to our committees for selection. We'll go into contracting, which could take up to a month. So realistically, we're looking at project starts, say, in February of next year. Okay. And then there were some questions around monitoring mechanisms, so how will we follow our money? I think I saw a question around how long the projects are expected to be implemented for. We'll sign contracts for between 6 and 2 years, 6 to 18 months, 2 years. During this period, there will be monitoring mechanisms where we request quarterly reports. We also do site visits, and we also do a mini validation, like an audit of the finances, as well as the outputs that have been reported on, whether it's the number of people in training, the number of people placed, if it's a piece of equipment that needed to be bought, we'll validate that it has been bought in the right specs, etc., etc. So we're quite active on that. And then, like I said, there may be the projects may be selected for audits by our internal audit. We may request an external audit, and then we also do an evaluation study. There are also some questions about whether we'll fund property purchases, we'll fund equipment and so on. We prefer not to, because those are assets that can generally be funded, I think, through the many other funding mechanisms available. We also don't want money stuck, or not necessarily stuck, but going to an asset too quickly where the outputs aren't delivered. So we make allocation for enabling infrastructure, enabling assets, but we try not to do big things or things that can take long, like land purchase or building a building and things like that, because those are things that you can generally securitize with the traditional funding organizations. At this stage, I have come to the end of my presentation, so we will take some more questions, and yes, we'll take it on the chat, unfortunately, and then we will end the webinar. So we'll maybe sit on for about the next. We did book till 12 for the next 30 minutes or so, responding to your questions. 25 minutes, and then after that we will be ending the webinar. Thank you very much for your engagement and your participation, and I hope that we have given you some insight into what we're looking for and how to come back with a strong application. Okay, just as a reminder, we will share the slides to all present, to all that registered, and we'll also see how to make the recording available for those who maybe need to go over certain aspects. Okay. Okay, Gele, thank you. So for inquiries, Zianda, Mpumi is going to type in the Innovation Fund email address, and so all your inquiries can be channeled to that email address, and we will respond there. Please allow for perhaps a day to respond just because of the volume, but we'll definitely respond. Lopang, I'm not sure what tier 1 partners are. Please, can you expand on that? Okay, so there's a question on match funding. So if you secured this is where it can get quite technical. As a private company, securing funding for equipment from a third party and having it qualify as match funding. So like I said, the match funding we will consider is cash into an account. And in fact, when we go into further on into contracting, we ask that a separate bank account is open. So unfortunately, not the equipment won't be considered as cash match funding. There's a question about software licensing for VFX. If the question is, will we consider funding that? Yes, I think we have done so in the past. Again, hoping that, we are able to cover other aspects that facilitate the job creation and income generating aspects for the young people, but we have done so in the past. Okay, then there's a question on who funds asset-based funding. We will also put something in the chat, just a general search on, funders. I know land maybe tough, but for sure, if it's a piece of equipment, I know there are many
What's Saki? What's Saki go?
Okay, so Edward, you have raised a good question. If the two parties are applying as a consortium, please give us both. If not, if one is maybe an implementing partner, what we call an implementing or a service provider, then give us the details of the one that is eventually going to contract with the IDC. Okay, yes, and Lopang, we will consider joint ventures, consortia, etc., just as long as you're properly governed, there's agreements, we know who's doing what, etc. Hey, Chris, the scope is micro entrepreneurship. Would earnings from this business be considered as a stipend? It will take a huge requirement off the process. Sorry, Chris, I'm going to try, and if I don't get it, please tell me where I've missed it. So the earnings from the earnings from the business will be considered as earnings, and how we will determine whether it's, say, a sustainable enough business is whether they at least meet the minimum wage for that sector, whether it's on an hourly basis or, if we aggregate the month. So yes, we absolutely want to engender independence and sustainability, but we want it also to be a living, a livable income. So for example, if we are doing all this and they're making 350 Rand a month, for example, then, we have to weigh the cost benefits of whether it makes sense for them to continue earning 350 a month after investing 10 million, or for them to, get a social a grant. So yes, we'll definitely consider it, and it's a good thing, but we ask that it be over time. Yes, we know entrepreneurship is a journey, but over time we request that it be at least at minimum wage. So the match funding, oh yes, very good question. It can be made available in tranches, but the agreement governing it should cover our period together. So we don't expect to see all the match funding in a bank account on day one, but at least we want to see that if it's an organization, the board has said we'll make it available for the period of 2 years, or if it's an agreement with another funder that will deposit it also over a period of 2 years. And then we have Andre creates a productive into what? Invited into the opportunity. Okay, I don't understand your question. So please just and elaborate perhaps in the chat, Andre. Okay, and then Surika. Yes. And this is where the consortium decision is important. If you're coming in as a consortium, then give us the financials for all the members. If you're coming in just as one with supporting partners, then we just need the one that's going to engage with the IDC, that's going to be contracting with the IDC. I hope that answers your question. So no, if the MPO is new and they just have a letter from the accountant, no, because, well, we need the audited statements or reviewed statements, and we also need the proof of 3-year track record. So it would be ineligible on those two accounts. Okay, Nancy. So the engagement will be 18 to 24 months. It depends on what the program is promising to do when we see the deliverables, the outcomes, etc. We really would like it to be as quick as possible, but we give that space for really exceptional in exceptional cases. Okay, so the max amount is 10 million. We've talked about joint ventures, and the minimum request is 3.5. Yes, so if you are an NPO, you can request 3.5 and leave it there. Your project therefore is 3.5, and maybe you have some in-kind funding or you have some other cash funding. If you're a private organization, your minimum project has to be therefore 7 million, because you're asking us for 3.5 in grant. We expect you to match 3.5 with your cash. So recruits per organization, we haven't specified, but we do want it to be substantial. I would say in our last round, we didn't go lower than 300. So we really wanted to be high numbers. So hundreds, please, and if not thousands. We had, I mean, some of our partners in the last round, I think the highest was at 2,400. It's not obviously a cap, but we do encourage high numbers, of course, to the extent that the organization can manage and process them. Desired outcomes. Ooh, Gele. So are you talking about, I'm gonna go back to the scope, right? Of the EOI, if I understand your question. Just because we have a little bit of time. Okay, Surika, so we're not specific on when stipends are paid, right? But we have many partners that do show quite varied experiences with stipends. We have partners where they don't pay stipends and they have a tough time retaining. We have a few partners that are trying to pilot different ways to pay stipends, to use it as incentives and so on. And that's still quite new in our portfolio, so we're still observing that. But we are not prescriptive. But we hope that when you design the program, it's considered against retention, because they are, we do find that sometimes the young people they're looking for a stipend. It's reasonable. And if there's another program that's close by that has a higher stipend or that has a stipend, they would opt for it. So we ask you to design it just with the, awareness of what's around in your environment. Sorry, colleagues. And where the stipends are paid, we emphasize again that they should be at minimum wage, yeah. All right. So sorry, I'm just going to ask that the presentation be pulled up again to the scope. Gele, I'm coming back to your question. Okay, so Matimba, the references should be, if three of them are with the same clients, and that's, what the organization has taken the bulk of the organization's time in the recent past, then I think we'll accept it. Ideally, we do want it from three different clients, but it can't be the same projects, right? So yes, 3 projects or 3 clients, or 1 client with 3 projects, but not the same project, not the same project that's multi-year, for example. So not a reference that, oh, you did this in 2021 and then in 2020, but it's the same project. That won't satisfy. And then Chris is asking, with a program that builds on existing education to leverage the success of program. So Chris, your question is quite loaded, but I think provided that it meets the requirements of the EOI and it hits, all the impact aspects, then it will be considered. So yeah, I just want to see. No, absolutely not, Nancy. So you can't use stipends from an existing fund, an existing program, especially not an existing IDC program, as co-funding. No. So actually you take me to a question that came up in the registration documents around whether existing clients could be considered. So in the EOI, we've said that existing Innovation Fund clients will have to have met 80% of their targets in order to be considered, right? So that's for the Innovation Fund clients. Under the other programs funded by IDC, there's no exclusion. However, we would also obviously do our reference checks with the program managers for those programs. And we do request that the funding and the programs are kept quite separate. They're accounted for separately. The outputs are counted separately so that we don't have an element of double dipping or duplication. Okay, I see. Okay. CETA funds can be used as co-funding. We are not averse to bringing that in for co-funding. The source can be from anywhere except the PYEI, so that is, or the PES, so that's Presidential Employment Stimulus Programs, or other aspects of the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative, NYS, and so on, but not, so if it's none of those, we will consider it as co-funding. So, Gele, I think it was you, we are looking for organizations that will actively facilitate the matching of young people to job opportunities in corporates or small businesses in their locality, and or match young people with business opportunities in value chain, in and around, well, in value chains. It need not be in their locality, but we do want young people to be able to tap into value chains that are otherwise inaccessible to them, maybe because it's technical, there's a high cost barrier, etc. So that's the central requirement of the EOI, right? So then how do you do it, or where do you do it? We want you to do it for young people that reside in marginalized areas, peri-urban areas, township poverty nodes. So we're trying to stay away from this concentration that happens in the economic centers and or areas with high levels of youth unemployment. How do you do it? We want you to partner as much as it makes sense with local organizations, community-based organizations, municipalities, etc. And they need not be all doing the same thing or be as prominent in the partnership, but we want to see that there are strong links to local systems in the project design. Sorry, I'm just going to the next slide. And so we've talked about and different segments of the youth employment ecosystem. So it's training, it's vocational work, it's employment, it's psychosocial support. We want to see, so over and above the fact that it's local, but the extent that it does bring in different segments that will enable a young person to journey through the pathway in a supported way, whether they need assistance with where to get opportunities, where to get inputs, where to get clients in that kind of fashion. And like we said, the grant will be between 3.5 million and 10 million, and we'll avail that in tranches. I hope that's useful, Gele. If not, please type something and we'll see how to assist you. Okay. Sure. Thanks, Matimba. So for partnerships at this, and similarly with the match funding, at this stage, we are happy to look at letters of intent if you are engaging with them and they're saying, yeah, okay, we are looking at these broad things, you know, broad high level heads of agreement. When we go into stage 2, then we'll ask for, you know, a full-on agreement, and then we will actually, you know, have to have a look at those partners that that you're working with in the due diligence. But for now, letters of intent, if there's an agreement, yes, that will be a top price to say that we are working, or we have been working. If it's a historical partnership, even better, because it means you've ironed out all the kinks that, you know, can happen with new partnerships. Okay. And in further down the line, when we get past into stage 2, if it's a local municipality, we do need the governing authority there, being the council resolution, to endorse the partnership, just so we protect everyone involved, especially the young people. Okay, so maybe we leave it for another 3 minutes, and then we'll close off. Thank you very much for all your questions. They're really appreciated. Yes, Gele, you can. In fact, we require that you use SA Youth to recruit the young people. Yeah, I think we have, like, is it 4 million registered plus 5 million? So yeah, we do require that you use that platform. You can use others, and we encourage integration between your platform and the ones and the SA Youth. But you have to use SA Youth to recruit. Okay. Thanks, Rorisang. I'm actually going to include this question in the FAQ, or to remember to stay on it a little bit more next time. So no, we're not prescriptive that the grant should primarily be used for candidate stipends. It should be used for the facilitation of the young people, or the integration of the young people into an economic system, right? If it's a training project, I mean, let me not say a training project, because we're not going to have those. If it's a project that's going to impart some skills and place them in a work environment, there will be some training that is required. So the actual, training of the young people, there may be stipends, there may be material required. There will be some project administration costs, maybe transport, phones required. So the grant can cover all that. It's not going to just look at stipends. We do understand that the project, is more than stipends. I hope that covers Lopang solar PV value chain. Yeah, I mean, it's our sunrise sector. It's artisans. It lends itself to entrepreneurship. So yes, yeah, and just consider that it's 10 million. So what is the best use of that 10 million for the young people to be able to deliver these services, or deliver these PVs to their clients? Okay. So, colleagues, it is 11:30. I think we continue to see the chats post, right? And we will, so if there's any further chat, we will share. Please give us till 2 o'clock to share the presentation with you. We're just going to incorporate the two presentations. So by 2 o'clock Sandile, the presentation will be available. Thank you very much, and all the best with your applications.